Hi, my name is Kelly. I'm your somatic educator today for the next 30 to 45 minutes and we're gonna go over some steps to get this collaborative, growth-oriented relationship between the body and the mind. So how is that? How is that dialogue that we can have when we sense ourselves to be one that is generally optimistic and, of course, sometimes some ideas might come up that aren't the most helpful for us, but to really know, okay, we can go to this place where we can have a dialogue with the body that is going to help get us to where we want to go, which is a place of pleasant experiences, feeling calm, at ease in the body, learning new things, discovering new ways to hold our posture, new movements, and just beliefs and ideas about ourselves and our body that are nice to have. So we'll get into those, but a little bit of an agenda for today. So our path today is going to be somatic movement. What is it actually? I find a lot of people I chat with have some sort of idea, but they don't know exactly what it is, which makes sense. It's a broad category, sometimes referred to as somatic awareness. There's some branded stuff too, like somatic experiencing. So we'll get into what that is here. And then a little bit of an awareness model, since the way I educate and practice somatic movement mostly is really based on awareness and perception. That's a part of it, right? Like what information are we taking in, how I perceive that information, and then how do we move based on that? And there's other methods that focus a bit more on the movement aspect, which I think is really, really cool and awesome. And I practice some of those too. But the one that I'm teaching here is a little bit different. So I'll get into more details on that. And then what are we actually intending to do? What is the aim of our training and how is that set up? What's the format? Then we'll go into the actual 6 steps that I've got listed out here. And then if this resonates with you and you're interested to learn more, then the next steps for doing more training. Okay, so somatic movement. What is it? Well, somatic, soma, that word means the living body. It's from Greek, and that is, I'm almost apprehensive to say it, but like the body as opposed to a corpse, right? The corpse is not a soma. The soma is all the processes and everything that go on within this membrane here that are life. It's the living body. So awareness of the soma is awareness of those processes, awareness of the living body. And how do we become aware of that? Well, we become aware of that through sensation. So you might be able to look at yourself in the mirror or like look at yourself and see, okay, like that is sensation, that's light, and say like, that's my body, I'm aware of my body. With somatic movement, we're mostly interested in the proprioceptors and the interoceptors. So that is nerve endings inside our body, and also the ones on the outside, like just under the skin, subcutaneous ones that like touch and pressure and all that. But we're mostly interested in those because those are the ones that we really use to position our skeleton through the muscles, through the skeletal muscle, differently to achieve postures that are more or less efficient or elegant. Right, when we talk about efficiency, I want to be very careful because there is in theory the most efficient way to organize yourself, which means like the lowest use of energy, the lowest use of ATP, the energy currency in the body. But then what about stylistic choice, right? Like sometimes that most efficient way doesn't feel the best to us. So there's no right or wrong way to do anything. What this practice is really about is like exploring different options in a range of ways. And with somatic work, it's really, really subtle. So sometimes I'll tell a client, and I learned this from one of my teachers, is, okay, I want you to like move your head to the side, but if I were standing 10 feet away from you, maybe I wouldn't even notice. Or explore that space between the thought becoming the actual expression in 3-dimensional space that we can see from the outside. That's about a somatic movement. Now getting into the details of the way I practice it, which is a method called PME, Physio-Mentale Entwicklung, which is German for physio-mental development, but that word development in German, similar to the Romance and Latin languages where development means like disentanglement. So we spend a lot of focus on like what is the quality of our mind as we're sensing things. So we have we're going to get into a model of this here in a second, but just real briefly, you can engage with anything, interact with different things, with the mind as the subject, interacting with an object. So when the mind is interacting with the body, there's two things going on there. And what is the quality of that interaction? So we focus a lot on like a compassionate, curious, open quality of interaction. And the way I coach this is to create a lot of cues to be like, where's your awareness now? Sense yourself compassionately, sense yourself openly, so we can access that information. So the aim is helpful in healing development, using that information in the body, the sensory information in the body. I hope there wasn't too many tangents there and that was clear. I'm gonna get into some more details of what somatic movement is here. So our main tools are awareness of sensation. So awareness can be anywhere, awareness of sensation, awareness of the body. Movement, which creates new sensation, and also movement is a way to express the information that we've taken in a way that's regulatory for the body or regulates the body. Touch. And then we also step out of the practice itself. Actually, let me go into verbalized reflection here. So not all somatic practices have this, but I include a verbalized reflection as part of the practice so that we can take this experience that sometimes feels like weird and esoteric and like, oh, what am I sensing? And people describe it as nostalgic. I've had that a lot of times too. And then discuss it to kind of cement it in the brain or into the experience as like, okay, I have a bit more understanding of what I've experienced. It's not just like this vague, nebulous, maybe spiritual thing that I don't really get, because it can have, that experience is common. There's nothing wrong with that, but I feel like it sticks more when you can actually relate it to something else that we're familiar with, which is like more cognitive, logical concepts. So we also use cognitive concepts and ideas in this education. That's the theory. So in addition to actually practicing sensing the body, we study anatomy, physiology, evolutionary biology, some Buddhist psychology, kinesiology, and more, just to offer new perspectives of the body, right? So I'm gonna get into this model here in a second where it's like, when you sense the body, what are the different ideas and what information do you have access to perceive yourself in different ways? So what does this actually look like? What does somatic look like? So here's some images of me working with clients. A lot of touch. So in all of or me working with myself too. So in all these examples, there's touch. There isn't always touch. Sometimes, actually most of the time, I'll just be standing face to face in an individual coaching session, mimicking the client, asking questions. But touch is very, very common, and touch is helpful. And we work on this really specific style of touch. But here I'm holding a client's head, and in this situation, I remember I was asking her, like, what are you sensing? Sense yourself mindfully and compassionately. Usually that's the theme. Give me the weight of your head. And she was exploring, kind of moving her neck around. And this middle one here, again, it was surrendering weight into my arms there. And then moving the spine through different positions. And we were actually touching the spine and linking the skull to the pelvis there. And then in this last one, I'm doing a self-practice where I had noticed that the parts of my body asking for attention were my shoulder here and my face. So I was using my hand to like amplify awareness to those places and sensing compassionately what was going on there, using that information for more movement or to change my places of touch to regulate. This is in person, and a lot of this education is done in person and a lot of it is done online. And here is an example of what a one-on-one coaching session online might look like. And this is me with one of my classmates when we were studying, and she's giving me a coaching session. So you can see in this top left image here, she's mimicking me by putting her hand on her own shoulder. And she was asking me questions about, what are you sensing? Sense it mindfully, sense it compassionately. How do you want to move? What would be a nice way to move? What would be lots of keeping my awareness on the body and checking in with what my quality of dialogue was with my body, and then using cues to bring it to a state that is more open, compassionate, and helpful, so I could access the information from my body. So when I started rolling around on the floor a little bit, she wanted to mimic me as best she could, but also wanted to be able to keep an eye on what I was doing. So she wasn't mimicking me to that extent of rolling around. And then, so somatic movement can be anything really, because you can see in this last image, I'm just lying with my face flat on the floor. And I was probably sensing my weight in gravity and surrendering to the floor. But this is just to show the range of movements that it could be, as large or as subtle. Typically they're slower movements, because you can think of like at any moment, there's a certain amount of information you can be processing. And if this is the entire range of the movement, if I move through that movement like that quickly, as opposed to like this quickly, or even sometimes like back down, then I can explore the quality of my posture and my movement in that range with more attention, more fine-tuned attention. So typically it's slower. But there's this big emphasis on like your own agency in your body too. So no one's telling you like how to move or not to move. We just want to move in a way that we can actually sense the self, that is helpful and healing. So going into the training process, like what does it actually look like? Well, it's mostly practice. So, and then real quickly, I didn't show any images of like group practices. So sometimes we practice this in a group where each person is kind of doing their own thing. And then we share and have feedback circles. We do that both online and in person. Or we also have games where we interact with other people. So like touch games that are really fun and helpful, where we can like use other people's touch or do some sort of contact improvisation. And that's all really fun too. So there's no images of that. You just got to see me working with some clients and then me getting a coaching session online. Looking at the training process, most of it is practice. Most of it is actually, if you're gonna get good at anything, anything, just the more you do it, the more familiar you become with it, and the more natural you can enter into that, whatever it is that you're practicing. So most of it is practicing that dialogue with the body and that awareness and the reflection aspect. Most of it being the actual practice. Then we use theory to support this dialogue with the body and support like the idea that the body is a really rich source of information that can be helpful, and also to offer new perspectives on the body. So whatever your perspectives of the body are right now, when you sense the self, what would it be like if you had more knowledge on that? What would it be like if you understood some of these things we're listing here: anatomy, physiology, a little bit about the mind, how the mind works with Buddhist psychology, kinesiology, and evolutionary biology. Like, you're gonna have more options of ways to perceive. And I'll talk here in a moment about how that can be helpful. So let's go into this model of awareness, where you have awareness. Your awareness can be on anything. Like your awareness of light right now in this moment, if you just look forward and then move your eyes, like without moving your head, just move your eyes all around to like the limits of the border. That's your current awareness of all the light that you can take in. Now you can move, organize your skeleton a little bit differently and take in more information, but that's that awareness of light right now. So your awareness, you can also have awareness of, ideas, images, emotional experiences. These are all things of which we can be aware. So we are practicing bringing awareness to the body. And of course, it can go somewhere else. Like an idea can pop up, a sound can come up, but we're practicing bringing it back to the body. So that's the first skill that we're practicing here. There's many reasons why that can be challenging. For one, I often think from a young age, in school, we're like, need to ask permission to use the bathroom, or we're like told to sit down all day when we really just need to be running around like how little kids need to be. So bringing awareness back to the body is the first thing. Now, in that experience of awareness on the body, again, so when the body is the object of the mind being the subject, what can come up there? We talked about sensations. We can also have emotions that come with physical reactions, ideas, beliefs, and mental images. So we really want to start to look at these things, or not we do start to look at these things and start to sense them. So that's why that compassionate state is really helpful, because if we can just sense whatever's there, then we can start to get more information about them and start to identify which of these experiences that are listed here are helpful and healing for us in the moment. So that's that second skill, is that compassionate, gentle sensing. So when we have the body as the subject, as the object, can we be compassionate? Can we be gentle? Can we actually sense the self? Now, once we start to be able to sense the self in that way and the awareness, so it's like putting the awareness on that seems to somehow help the processes along, the healing processes along. When you put awareness on any project that you're working on or anything that you're focused on, it develops. So we have the same thing going on here. Now, once we're able to do that, can we then allow for movement? That's where the movement piece comes in. Allow for this movement that is self-regulation. So can we find new postures? Can we find new movement patterns? Can we find new thought patterns, new belief patterns? Those are also forms of movement. Thought is a form of movement, physically, actually. So we're talking about both thought patterns and belief patterns and movement patterns here. So we look at this model here. We have sensory information coming from the body into awareness, and then self-regulation happening. So sensory information in the form of movement, touch, emotions as a result of perceiving something, and then hormones being released in the body and that actually affecting the nervous system. And then the self-regulation in the form of muscle tone, movement patterns, thoughts, and beliefs. Why sensation? Well, sensation is the most potent form of information for self-regulation. It's the information of the present state of the body experienced by the first person. And this information here that we can use right here, right now, like why is it hard to make use of? Because sometimes we're unsure about this idea that it's actually useful information. Like sometimes it pains me to think about this because I've had this belief before, and it's not wrong. It's not wrong to what I'm about to say, but it discounts the value of the information we are available to access in ourselves. That is super, super, super helpful, and often the information that we need to regulate ourselves. So what I'm going to say is sometimes we believe that somebody else knows more about our body than we do. And in certain circumstances, that's totally true, right? Like in certain extreme circumstances, or where there's like some sort of special equipment or information needed to analyze the body, then that's totally true. That doesn't mean that firsthand information in those situations isn't also very useful and pertinent. And it doesn't mean that a lot of the time when we're dealing with like recurring injuries or chronic pain or just this loop of an experience where it's like sense the body, feel frustrated, afraid, scared, or whatever, have some sort of reactionary pattern that's tensing and beliefs that aren't good about the self. This is an example where actually using sensory information that is more raw sensory information, because as soon as I sense that sensory information and I start to add concepts and emotions on top of it, I'm not sensing that information anymore. I'm sensing like effects of that information or summaries or abstractions of that information. So a lot of time when like I mentioned earlier in school, where we learn a lot about calculus before we learn about how to sense the own body and sense breathing, right? We don't take yoga or breath work in school. Maybe we do. I hope people are doing that now. I'm sure schools are doing that now. But we don't practice sensing, and we don't know what to do with this information. It's like, okay, I've sensed it. Now what do I do? Like, what do I do? Right? I need to go to see a doctor or something. And also this last bit where, because a lot of emotions and unpleasant ideas and thoughts are coupled with sensory experiences and muscle tone in the body, this can become a challenging place to navigate. So a lot of this work that's why compassion comes in, because we need to be patient, we need to be gentle, and we need to just be aware that this can be very challenging. And any moment that we can sense the body compassionately and get more information, or openly and curious, is a huge win. It's a huge win to just gain that one extra moment, that one extra perspective. So we're going to move into the 6 steps here shortly. But a quick check of why I think you might be interested in this, and maybe there's other reasons, but So I've listed, if you're here, you're probably curious about yourself and what happens to your sensations, thoughts, movement, postures, and beliefs when you learn more about yourself. So what happens with more knowledge, firsthand knowledge and theoretical knowledge? You would like a more easeful, collaborative, and growth-oriented relationship between the mind and the body, as opposed to that one that I just mentioned, that pattern. A lot of the time, what I use as an indicator, and I'm stuck in these patterns a lot, less with my body now, but still definitely with my body, but more with other things like my relationship with money and sometimes my relationship with other people. They're all in a spot that I'm very happy with and I can sense the growth, but if it's the same pattern that's repeating itself and it's an unpleasant pattern, that is where it's like, okay, let's find a new perspective. Let's find a new way to approach this. So if that pattern with the body is like one that doesn't feel nice, it's like a dialogue that doesn't feel cooperative, like with a good teammate, a good colleague, a person who cares for you and loves you, or vice versa. If it doesn't feel like that and you're going back to that same experience over and over and over again, it's time probably to learn a new perspective here, get more information about it. So you also need to be open to experiencing new perspectives and how to dialogue yourself and how you're going to interact with the world outside of you. So you need to be open to like a you that you don't know yet, right? And it feels very intimate to explore the self in this way, in my experience and experience working with other clients. So not getting too freaked out about that, because it's easy to want to go back to something familiar. So being aware of that too, being aware of like, and I think this is interesting because I've noticed this, there can be this state of like this pattern that wasn't helpful in the past being present with this new pattern, and like a fear to let go of that old pattern. But what if you can practice holding them both at the same time and like taking this old pattern that is so familiar and maybe served you in the past and like holding its hand and being like, yo, like, thank you so much, and really appreciating it and being like, I'm so grateful that you were there this whole time. And whatever this dialogue is with a part of your body, with an idea, a belief, and not abandoning it, but integrating it into your new experience. So this comes with awareness, right? And becoming more aware of beliefs and concepts around pain, the body, and self-image that are or are not helpful in healing. Now, we're going to cover now in these 6 steps the mindset and experiences that help cultivate a mature, collaborative, growth-oriented relationship with your body, how to recognize the current and develop different patterns in the way you perceive the self, practical steps to discovering healing postures, movements, and beliefs about yourself, and then again, the next steps if you're interested. So the first thing is the student of the self. Knowing that you, and only you, are the expert of your experience and valuing this sensory information from the first person experience. So not understanding how to navigate the body, doubting yourself, really intense emotions that aren't that pleasant, even ones that are pleasant, can get in the way of this like very nuanced sensing of the information that's there. So again, connecting with this part means being open in any moment to experience something new that you haven't experienced before, because the truth is that every moment is new. Every moment is presenting new information. And yeah, we are really designed to pick up on patterns, and that is very, 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 very helpful. But sometimes we can revisit these patterns and see if we can develop new ones, or if we can tweak the current ones that exist. And just a question as a reflection, if you want to pause or take time or do it at some other point in the day, is what do you sense in your body when you observe yourself compassionately? And this idea of what comes up, what part of your body do you sense? How is it to sense that part of your body compassionately and to allow the body to say, hey, I want attention here, I want attention here. So this student of the self values learning over everything. And really, in summary, what this is about is to, again, like say, there is so much value in learning about myself and from a conceptual way of these models and how I've evolved into this through evolutionary biology, how my system works, the physiology, all of that, and to learn about yourself through the firsthand experience of sensing the self. So that's step one, is to really value that. And we can look at, like, as a kid, when you're first born, you've got this innocent and you're like constantly curious. You're just like, whoa, what is everything around me? And you're learning about yourself through touch. You're learning about, where this membrane of the self ends and the rest of the world begins and how you interact with it. Then at a certain point, maybe, if you're like me, you develop some like contained and I feel like very certain about certain concepts and the way things work and the way medicine works and the way the body works and the way the body needs to heal through interacting with medical systems that are all fantastic. Medical systems are great. Modern medicine, Western medicine has saved my life more than once and got me back to performing as a extremely competitive athlete multiple times too. So yeah, bless that system. But it's like, I've also used it inappropriately sometimes too, where what I needed was really just to figure out what was going on in here. And I've noticed that a lot of people these days are doing that. So that is, again, that same point there, which I think a lot of people might be coming to this video for. So we want to enter into this space now of curiosity and exploration again, but now with some more intention I guess it doesn't matter if it's with intention. We want to set aside time to do it and know it's almost like we have to like convince ourselves the value of this type of exploration again. And that's my job, is to make this interesting. It's my job to present you with practices and theory that gets you interested and not just like, dude, what are we freaking doing? Like sensing ourselves, blah, blah, blah. And I like that challenge. So going to number 2, right? Exploration. We're talking about exploration. So how do we set ourselves up to explore? So I was just talking about making it interesting. Well, the first thing is to have a safe space. We need to feel safe that we can explore. We hear a lot about the parasympathetic nervous system. Well, you might think of in a situation where you feel threatened, it's very advantageous to start to categorize things as safe or not safe, as a threat or something that's safe to move towards. That is like when we enter that state with the parasympathetic nervous system activated, we are really good at categorizing those things and deciding. So we're setting up these categories and we don't care about exploring as much as we care about mobilizing our body into positions that are further or closer away from things that are going to be helpful or not helpful to us, disadvantageous or advantageous for us. That's not the state we want to be in when we're doing somatic exploration, because it doesn't keep us open to the truth, which is that every moment is new. It keeps us in a state of caution or like giving the benefit of the doubt to safety more than exploration, which is great. But we don't want to be in that state, because we want to really explore intimately new things and be non-judgmental and not categorize. So we can work on enlisting actually alertness, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system too, and concentration, focus, in a way to explore. So an example, we might say like, all right, I want to focus on my body. So alertness, can you just let me know when my mind drifts off? Okay, thanks. Concentration, good, stay on my body. And mindfulness, if I forget what I'm actually doing, so alertness will say like, hey, you've gone away. And mindfulness can say, oh yeah, this is what we were focusing on. So we can enlist all these qualities of the mind as allies in exploration. Now, when we get into this exploration and we're first starting off, I'd say an aim, like an outcome would be you as a student learning about yourself, learning about somatic education, learning about your own soma, would be at any point to be like, okay, what part of my body is asking for attention right now? And just start to like find some sort of regulation. Or something I'm working on would be at any kind, you have this idea of the state of the body nearby at all times. It's like, even if you're so focused in another task that is maybe very cognitive, like working on your computer, at any point, this little bit of awareness can come up and be like, yo, like we need some attention here. And that can mean like some sort of little adjustment, right? And to achieve that, we actually go in and practice really, really heavily. But as a starting point, so that I was just describing a situation where like I would know what I need to adjust and how to adjust it at any point and have that available whenever. But as a starting point, we can, as a group or with a coach, say, hey, like, let's start exploring the head with touch. You know, how does that feel? Let's look at some anatomy of the head. Let's really focus on our quality of mind. How is this dialogue? So those are some starting points. And then when I talk here about exploring the map and expanding it, this gets into not necessarily like an athletic application of somatic movement, but I mean, definitely athleticism is everything from big expansive movements to like the subtlest refinement of a movement, is exploring the places of movement that feel uncomfortable or that can feel more fluid. So an example could be like, as I move my shoulder back here, at a certain point, it doesn't feel as fluid or comfortable, and just exploring that space. So backing off of it. So when I talk about map here, I talk about a map of space that feels comfortable and accessible to us. You can think of if you could do all possible human movements, then you have this huge range of movements. Imagine this is all the potential of human movement. When you get close to reaching your edge, so actually let's go back and let's say like this is your range and this is the whole range of human movement. This is your range. Your nervous system has built in this buffer. So as you approach the end ranges, you start to modify your movements. You start to brace, you start to hold yourself a little differently. And if, however, you've gone through an experience where the joints and the muscles have stretched to that point or flexed to that point, you're not afraid of that. You're familiar. You're like, cool, I can do this. I've done this before. It's just like executing on some sort of thing you've done before, whatever that might be. Not necessarily even in your body, even just like as a team or as something you're doing at work. You like know the protocol of how to execute something. Your nervous system stores that in a map, in engrams, actually. So like you can think of movements like an entire movement here is like a sentence, right? And then there can be broken down to words, and that can be broken down in like small portions. You store those and can recall them. If we have access to more that we've gone through and feel comfortable doing, so it doesn't mean just like forcing yourself through the movement, it means doing the movement in a way that feels explorative and safe and that you've actually learned more about it, then that range of comfort becomes much larger too. And then we can express ourselves more safely and in ways that lead to less injury, less chronic pain, less fatigue, because we just have access to more fluid movements in a wider range where we don't feel we have to brace. And I mean, just think of like getting up from something, right? Or can you be on a ledge that's 3 feet off the ground and just jump down and land nicely? Like, even if you can you learn to do that better? And how does that change the way you interact with your environment as you move through it? So that's a lot on exploration. And then getting into some theory, and I'm being very theoretical already. This understanding of what's going on from this cognitive level too is very helpful in integrating the entire experience, and supports the practice, supports the like, yeah, sure, let's go practice. I kind of get it now. I want to, can we look at an anatomical structure in the body and from a model and then actually sense it? Can we look at the jaw and then sense it from the outside? And does that become more interesting for us? Does understanding co-regulation, this image here on the left, make this more interesting to us when we dialogue with other people, when we work with other people? Here we have an example of muscle fibers. So the way that your body can tell when a muscle is stretched is you have these little kind of like fibers that wrap around certain muscle fibers. When the muscle gets long, they go further apart from each other, and that like physical experience there translates into your subjective experience of having a muscle stretch. So again, like expanding ranges of motion and understanding that that is part of what's going on inside your body, and like those experiences are what you can use, that sensory information is what you can use to feel different and move differently. And then studying the mind a little bit, when we have And karma, right? How does my perception affect my behavior, which then affects the world around me, which then affects my perception? And then looking again, very, very anatomical, physiological stuff here. We just have a picture of I don't even think we have the skeletal system here. No, we just have the nervous system, which is the sensory system. We have the endocrine system, which is, yes, it's its own system of organs, but it sends hormones through the bloodstream. So it doesn't have its own piping. It uses the piping of the venous system, the blood. And then we have the lymphatic system, which is a part of the immune system and a system for draining fluids with different nodes, and it actually has its own tubing, its own piping. So what happens when we start to study theory, and how does this affect our practice? How does this affect the way we perceive ourselves? And again, just theory alone, like, you're never going to master something just theoretically through theory, right? No athlete, no dancer, no one who does anything just studies theory and doesn't do the practice itself, because the practice is where we get the feedback and really can measure if we're doing better and be able to integrate that information into our lives, into our postures, into our beliefs, into our movements, into the way we interact with people and experience it. So all of this becomes much easier when we practice in community. Now, this is a weird image. It is the expressive, it's the muscles in the face for expressing things. So as a species, if you're looking at me right now and I look like really concerned and we're in the same space, you know that there's probably something you should look at behind you. So this is an evolutionary advantage for survival. We can also use it to calm each other down, and like smiling and nice things can come. That's why talk therapy is so helpful, because this mammalian thing we have where we can interact with each other and we understand that cooperation and staying together is important for our survival and well-being. It's just programmed into us. So that's why we've got this picture of the face. And then this is just an image of, I also work at a gym teaching fitness, and this was a class we did in a gym. So it's just the community we had for that day, where we had some somatic work, and then we were able to share with each other what we experienced. So it's easier to do what the other animals like you are doing. Maybe you've noticed that in your social relationships, that some of the habits and behaviors you pick up are what the people around you are doing. And yeah, it's nice. I remember when I was around a lot of athletes all the time, which is really easy to do athletic things and recover from injury, because you had all these people being like, yeah, like, you're gonna get better and all that. And I remember developing injuries after being part of a soccer program that had a medical team that could treat us and a bunch of people taking it very seriously, and feeling pretty defeated because I realized that, I don't know if this is true, but I had the belief that no one cared about my health as much as I did, and I didn't have access to resources that could help me get better. So community of people experiencing similar things to what you're experiencing, maybe they're a little bit behind in some ways, a little bit ahead in some ways, but they're listening to you, they're supporting you, you can see that their experiences are similar to yours. Again, like, maybe you're like, oh wow, that gives me inspiration because it's a little bit ahead. Or like, oh, I can support them. And supporting people is very helpful for yourself too. So that community, and also just the accountability of showing up. So all this education that I'm offering here, if it's not one-on-one coaching, I have the community aspect. And even in the one-on-one coaching, there's a community aspect because we're talking with each other. And then also with community, you can draw inspiration from each other and discovering new things that you might not have otherwise discovered, which is just awesome. And then practicing as a group and discovering new things as a group. Because when I mentioned that every moment is new, and this isn't just about somatic work, because somatic work is an exploration of the self that's always changing. So you, as someone practicing it, are writing what it is in that moment too. It's not a fixed set of things. It's not a fixed set of tools. The tools and the experiences are changing as they're happening. So you can be developing new practices and new experiences. You are doing that in the moment. Now, the practice itself. This is an image of Ido Portal. He does lots of movement stuff, and he takes on a somatic perspective for sure, though his movements are much more athletic, in general, much more athletic and larger. IDOPORTAL, I would check him out. I think his stuff is really cool. But we're practicing sensing and moving. That's really what we're practicing. Sensing and then moving from that sensation. So practice, even when it's a day where you're like, I don't need to practice, or I don't feel like practicing, just practice. You don't have to. I don't practice every single day, but even the times where you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna be getting better at this. And there's a big learning curve, like with anything you do, where at first it's like, what am I really getting? I don't really get it. This doesn't feel really helpful. Actually, in my experience, it was kind of the other way around. The first time I was like, whoa, this is crazy helpful. And then kind of hit this point of like, what am I really learning here? This is like a waste of time. Let me go back to other ways to help myself. But it's like meditation. I mean, this is a moving meditation. So the more you practice, the more you become better at it and the more you see the benefits of it in your life. And you can explore more and more nuance, more subtleties of the practice, find new methods, find similarly themed practices, find ideas to incorporate to make it your own, to have like your own experience and your own expression through this, which is lovely. It's my favorite thing to see because it's so personal that what you're sensing and what you're expressing is coming, and this might feel a little bit abstract, but you're dialoguing with this information that's been with you and through all the things you've evolved from until now. Sometimes you're dialoguing with that, right? So it's kind of like information from the beginning of time that you can access when you really tune into the self. And yeah, that's about practicing yourself and then getting into coaching. So here we have image on the left here is my coach Dieter. He's my PME coach in Vienna. And then on the right, there's Tara. She's working with a client. She's a Feldenkrais, Feldenkrais teacher, and Feldenkrais focuses a lot on kinesiology and really subtle movements. The guy who developed Feldenkrais, his name is Moshe Feldenkrais, and he had discovered that, I think he was like let me look up what he is real quick. All right, he was an electrical engineer and judo practitioner and also played soccer. And I think the way he developed Feldenkrais, if I know correctly, was he had realized that he kept hurting his left knee and realized that if he initiates the movement of kicking with the muscles in his eyes, in his left eye specifically, I think, that he wouldn't injure himself. So he realized this like really deep connection between just different parts of the body and how, like, where does the movement actually start? Where does the movement actually begin? And what can that quality of movement be? And Feldenkrais is very focused on, a coach there is going to really observe and have you stay within that zone of like fluidity, like call like that creamy zone where everything feels like really easy and elegant. When you're a baby and you're first learning to move, you don't have this luxury of inefficient movement because you need to take these heavy structures in your body, the skull, the thorax, like all the ribs here, and the pelvis and the legs, and figure out ways to move them efficiently in gravity. That's a little bit about Feldenkrais, which I wanted to mention. So coaching. Now, I'm not talking about me coaching you. I'm talking about you coaching other people as part of this practice for your body. And when you're practicing coaching, when you're listening to somebody else and you're doing this kind of this meditation that I've learned in Buddhism too, which is the self is a perspective, and you can actually, that's not just some like, oh, the self is a perspective. You can experience that. So as you listen to somebody and you listen to someone very compassionately and closely, you can climb down that mountain of yourself and come up. You can experience what they're experiencing through their words and through their expression and really get into the self of someone else. Now, I speculate that the reason coaching is so therapeutic and helpful for the person coaching is, one, you get that other perspective of the self. And then two, it's like just giving, the act of giving makes you feel good, makes you feel like you have an abundance. So the act of giving, the act of giving your attention to care for someone else's body and well-being maybe somehow signals to yourself like, oh, I have an abundance of care and health that I can give to help other people. So and then this middle image is me coaching a client. We were sensing his spine, and it actually doesn't look like the most comfortable position. He actually told me after, oh yeah, I should have bent my knees more. That feels much more comfortable. But we were sensing the spine from where it starts here. It kind of starts like in the back of your mouth. The spine starts there and then goes all the way down to your sacrum. So we were sensing it, and like I was using my hands to amplify his awareness of his spine and where it was. All right, these are the 6 steps. These are the next steps for you. 1, I would say practice sensing yourself compassionately. I didn't list it here, but decide if this resonates with you. And prepare for our call that you've scheduled. So for the call, find some quiet space where you can focus. Being on a computer is best, but phone is also good too. And then have some pen and paper for notes. So a quick recap of what we've discussed here. We've talked about somatic movement, what it is, and the subtlety and the nuance in bringing perception inside and finding self-regulation. We've talked about this awareness model. So when we bring our awareness of our body when our body becomes the object of our awareness and our mind is the subject, what comes up there, what type of emotions, what type of feelings, what type of experiences, what type of sensations, and which ones of those are helpful in healing. The way that this training is laid out, where it's mostly practice, we do have a lot of theory. We've gone over the 6 steps, which are the student of the self. Number 1, 2, exploration and creating an environment where we feel safe, that we can explore. 3, supporting theory, so theory that helps us. 4 was community and listening to each other and supporting with each other. 5 was practice and just practicing as much as we can, really valuing the practice, understanding that we are the practice. The practice only exists because people practice it. So when you are practicing, you are the practice. And coaching. So you actually coaching and listening to other people. All right, thank you so much. It was a little longer than I expected, but thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you. Bye.